No, he never wanted a lock, so therefore he's off my list.
All right, we will start. Good morning, Sarah Lazarus. Everybody, please do not mute yourself because I'd like to be able to hear, some feedback, questions, whatever you want. So it's easier if you don't mute yourself. But with that comes your responsibility not to schmooze all that much and to disrupt the class. Okay. Morning, Rabbi Carpel. So I want to finish up today. I know a number of people have called me, believe it or not, during the week to say to me, what things that we're lecturing and talking about have really nothing to do with Malchut based David, and when are we going to really get onto it? And in a sense, you're all right. Everybody that called me is right, okay, because somehow we got hung up on Mechiras Yosef, and the original intent of Mechiras Yosef was to explain, Yehuda, who is the father, the beginning of the whole dynasty of David, to explain some of his actions and how, David HaMelech was affected by it. So I want to tie up today the few loose ends from Mechiras Chomet. I'm going to tie up the few loose ends that are out there. And then I want to get on to the topic really about Yehuda and the whole story of Yehuda and Tamar, because I find it to be a very fascinating story. Yeah. And hopefully I'll be able to give you some insights onto it. When we left last week, we were having a brief discussion about Yehuda and how we were going to evaluate Yehuda's action in the whole sale of Mechiras Chometz. And we said that Yehuda really, some people say he had a malicious intent. This was not a good Yehuda, that he really wanted to get rid of Yosef. And he felt that the best way of getting rid of Yosef was to sell him to Mitzrayim, to sell him. And this way, Yodeinu al Tehibo, our hands would not be involved in it, and he would be written out of history. So that's the point of Yehuda having a malicious intent. The other side of the coin said, no, Yehuda had a very, very virtuous intent. Ultimately, what he did allowed Yosef to live, all right? And he realized that if, in fact, he saved him, there would be another time, and he brought him back to his father. So history would repeat itself. There'll be another time where the brothers found him alone, and that they would then continue to do to him what they tried to do. So we have two sides to Yehuda. I'll leave it up to you people who are listening to decide which side of Yehuda. So I want to move on. Okay, just to tie up a few more things about Mechiras Yosef before we move on. Good morning, Sid Peres. Glad to see you. Sid, unmute yourself. Unmute yourself. Okay. Anyhow, just the first question to throw out. All right.
Made it last.
Okay. How did the brothers think they were going to get away with this?
Slowly.
Ultimately, how did they think they were going to get away with this? All right. Rhetorical question. So Bob feels that they got away with killing Shem, so they feel that they could get away with anything. So I just want to give you a
That's
little...
That's not what the Chumash says in other places. In the
it is here. It's not what the Chumash
says. Something different entirely. It had to be set up by Hashem this way. If they didn't do it this way, eventually Yaakov would have gone down in chains. So therefore, It was done with Hashem's Ashkam.
Okay, so all of this was done according to Sid with Hashem's. This was all planned out beforehand. That was what was going to be. So there's really no sense of us really talking about it at all because this was all planned out. Okay. Anyhow, I just want to give you a little insight here. I want to refresh your memory. I want to talk about two things. I want to talk about goats and coats. Goats and coats. Very interesting. Goats and coats, right? In the Yosef story, we have a goat, right? We have a goat.
Marty.
They killed a goat, and we have a coat. Yosef has a Kisonis Pasim, so we have a goats and a coat. And this crime was done with the goats and the colts. So going back to what the brothers were thinking, okay, who else got away with doing something involving a goat and a colt? Who else got away in the Torah doing something
Oh.
Yaakov.
that got away with a goat and a
Yaakov.
colt?
Yeah.
It was Yaakov. It was their own father, right? When it came to who Yitzchak was going to give the bracha,
Blessing. Yeah.
story involves very, very much a goat and a colt. Right? Rivka says to him, "Kach lecha g'di yizim and hatzon." Go take a goat and kill the goat, and I'll make from this goat. I'll make a very, very nice meal that your father Yitzchak likes. And Yaakov complains, but my father's going to touch me. And Yaakov is, Esav is hairy, and he has a certain smell from his coats and all of that. So Rivka says, "Don't worry. He left the change of coats here hanging on the hook. I'll give you his coat." So this is the way Yaakov was able to was able to get the bracha from Yitzchak. It involved a goat and a coat. All right. So the brothers said, actually what goes around, they say sometimes comes around, okay? So the brothers said, Yaakov, our father, got away with a goat and a coat, so we're going to get away with a goat and a coat too, all right? So that's how they felt. Is that okay with you, Sid, or no?
100%.
100%. Okay. All right. So we'll take that out, all right? So the next. I want to talk a little about, tie up a couple of things I left out about the Kisonas Yosef, okay? Yosef's coat. I asked you a question, okay? How many coats did Yosef have?
2.
How many coats did Yosef have?
2.
We spoke about 2 coats, right? According to Rashi, coat Aleph was he looked. Rashi says this was the coat that he had that was his undershirt, and then he had a Kisonas pas, right? He had the Yaakov gave him on top of that. He gave him a Kisonas pas. And we suggested that what was Yaakov thinking about this called Kisonas Yosef? And I said to you that it came right at the Bechor, which Yaakov considered Yosef very, very much to be his Bechor. The Bechor would get Pishanayim. So that's why Yosef had 2 coats, Pishanayim. And you all listened to me and you all said yes, but we didn't read the we didn't read the Pishnayim thing close enough. And I just want to go through with you the Pishnayim because the brothers are going to use this whole thing from Pishnayim, turn it on its head, and turn around to Yaakov and say, "See, Yaakov, what you did was completely wrong by giving Yosef the coat." So let's go through it very, very quickly. Right? I'll read it to you. You have it in your handouts. Okay, go look at the Kisieno Yisheteno Shim. Somebody has 2 wives. In the back, I think it's number 5, 6. Whatever it is. Kisieno Yisheteno Shim. Have 2 wives. Now I want you to concentrate on this word Senua. It appears only one other time in the Torah, the word Senua. Where does it appear?
Yaakov and Leah.
Yaakov and Leah, right? It's the only other time it appears 2 or 3 times with the whole relationship between Yaakov and Leah. So keep that in mind. Yodu Bonim, and they have children, sons. Over Hasnua, both of them have, okay? The Bein Abachor comes from the woman who is, I don't want to use, let's not use the word hated, but say the woman who is less loved, right? When it comes time to give, the Nachallah, the inheritance, he can't make the second one, the son of the loved one, he can't make him Levake to make him into the Bechor. Yakir. Now there's a very interesting word, Yakir, all right? Yakir. that he has to acknowledge, Yakir is to acknowledge that the son of the lossless location, he has to give him, he gets the double portion, the Chol Asher Yimotzei Lo. Everything that Vainsky, who gracious so no, Lo Mishpat HaBechorah. Okay? So, I have 4 words here, 4 phrases, 4 words here that are very, very problematical in the Torah that we have to focus in on. All right? All right? So the first one is Sinuah. We spoke about the word Sinuah, okay? Right? Second word is Yakir. Okay, what does the word Yakir mean?
Close.
Right? Close. Yakir, anybody? Yakir, anybody
Yeah,
listening? What-
close. Close. Endearing. Endearing. Close.
I think it
Corrode.
would be better. I think it would be better if the Torah said, read it this way: Ki es habichor ben hasnuah yitein lo pishnayim. Okay. What is this word Yakir doing here? Yakir is a very, very funny word. It should just say yitein lo pishnayim, right? So I have a little word with the word Yakir. We have the word Yimotzei, all right? Look at how the thing reads, okay? Piashtayim b'chol asher Yimotzei lo. So why can't they just say asher yesh lo? Okay? B'chol asher yesh lo. Why Yimotzei lo? What do you mean everything that would be found? Yimotzei lo. B'chol asher yesh lo. He has to give him double. And the final
Hashem
thing
knows everything.
look at is gracious ono. Now, gracious ono appears only one other time in the Torah. Who does that appear by? Gracious. Who does that appear by? It appears, the only other time it appears in the Torah is when Yaakov is giving the brachas to his sons, and when it comes to Reuven, what does he say about Reuven? That Reuven is, come on guys, you know this. Huh?
The firstborn.
Reuven b'choriata kochi v'reishis oni. So the only other time that this appears in the Torah is by Reuven. So I have Snua, I have by
Leah.
and Reishis Oni, I have by Reuven, right? In a sense, what are we saying here? What are the brothers going to hint to Yaakov? That Yaakov, you're mistaken, okay? If you want to give Yosef Pishnayim, because you're using Pishnayim, that's from the Torah, your interpretation of the Torah is wrong, Reuven is the Bechor, Reuven is the Reishis Oni, Reuven is the one that comes from, from the Snua.
Right.
Now, for the words Yakir and Yimotzei, where do we have Yakir and Yimotzei only one other time appearing in the same pasuk of the Torah? Where's the only other time it appears? Acknowledge, Yakir, and find. Okay, where's the only other time in the Torah it appears? Right here in our story, where the brothers say, where they find Exodus Pasim, they say, not only Haker more, Zos Motzonu Haker no. So the brothers are taking this whole thing with Pishanayim, they're turning it around on its head, and they're saying, using this to tell Yaakov, you have made a big, big mistake. Yosef is not your Bechor. The Bechor is from the Ben Hasnuah, okay? So you had no right to give him the Kesonas Pasim under the grounds of Pishnai, okay? All right. Let's move on. One other thing. Huh?
But the thing is that you should acknowledge that the Mashmat is in general, not just in the case of Yaakov. It's in general.
Yes. But Yaakov did not do that. Okay. One other thing. Let's go. I spoke about some general references here to, we have possibly here an Akedah story, right? We have an Akedah story here. What is the Akedah story? We found in this story of Yaakov sending Yosef to Shechem, we found, I suggested there were a lot of similarities to this and the Akedah story. Okay, when we get to the first beginning of the story, Yosef is summoned by his father to go on a mission. And what is Yosef's first response? Look at the text, don't look at me. First response is Hineni, right? Okay. He is when Hashem calls to Abraham, he wants him to go on the Akedah. What is Abraham's first response?
Hineni.
What are they saying? He's saying in effect, there's a possible scenario that's going to involve danger or doom. But Hineni, I am here and ready to accept. Okay? The Yaakov story, he's looking for the place, what he says, Vayiru osome rochok. Vayiru osome rochok, very clearly written in the Akedah story, right? There's only one other time in the Torah where those three words are used, almost exactly. Vayiru osome rochok, where is that?
With Yosef when he's coming.
The brothers seeing Yosef, Vayiru osome rochok, Vayisnaklu osola hamiso. So I have two references already to the Akedah, right? Number 3, what does Reuven say? Reuven uses the phrase, the Yod al tishluchu bo, right? What happens in the Akedah? All of a sudden, what? A Malach, Hashem, somebody pops up and says to Abraham, has been the al tishluchu bo, Yod al tishluchu bo. So I have 3 references already to the Akedah. Okay? All right? Number 4. In the Akedah, Vayisa Abraham es Einav, Vayavi Hineyayu. What does Abraham do? He sees that there's some salvation. There's going to be an alternative to sacrificing Yitzchak. Vayisu Abraham es Einav. Okay? What does the brothers do to avoid, again, this whole process of doom? Vayisu einehem vayiru v'hinei ochas yishmaelim. So I have 4 references in this Yosef story that I have the almost exact same 4 words in the Akedah. Right? Very interesting. But I'm not finished yet, okay? I'm not finished yet. So let's review. Hineni, both instances, Yosef and Abraham understand that what, for want of a better word, doom is approaching. But Hineni, I will accept it, okay? Yod al tishlechu bo, okay? Vayisu edem vayiru, okay? And finally, Vayisu edem vayiru, so there is no alternative to death. But the thing did not turn out the same way. Why? Because there is one other thing, there's one other unknown, one other similarity that I didn't talk to you about, okay? Both stories, how are both stories revolved? There is a malach in both stories, right? It's the malach that what? That saves Yitzchak, right? The malach gives the message to Yaakov, Abraham, don't do it. But in our story, there's a malach that continues the whole process. Okay? Now, why is this? Okay, why is this? Okay? And I want to go back to something I mentioned very, very briefly to you last week, and I called it the riddle of the bowing moon. Do you understand that, Sid? The riddle of the bowing moon. What is the riddle of the bowing moon that changed this whole story around? right? The riddle of the bowing moon is, huh? The riddle of the bowing moon. Okay, so it's the dream, right? It's the second dream that Yosef had. Okay, but in the second dream that Yosef had, I want to say to you that this is what causes Yaakov to send Yosef to his brothers. What is the riddle of the bowing moon, if we all remember? Yosef comes and he tells his brother and his father, okay, 11 stars will bow down to me. We know the brothers, okay, his father and his mother. But there's a problem with the dream. What's the problem with the dream? We said last week, the mother is dead. His mother is dead. So Yaakov cannot understand this. What is he talking about? Okay. Now, we also spoke about what are the qualities of being a Bechor. Okay. What was Yaakov looking for as a Bechor? To carry on a legacy. Right? He wanted a Bechor's job is to carry on the legacy of the father into the next generation. But Yaakov can't understand this because Yosef is constantly talking about bowing and bowing and bowing, and this is not the job of a Bechor. What is bowing to father, bowing down to him, have to do with the legacy? So now Yaakov has to, has to think in his mind, is Yosef really my Bechor? I can't understand this dream, okay? So what he has to do, okay, and this is my Torah, if you don't like it, I'll understand it. He has to devise a test to see really, is Yosef really, does he have the qualities to be a Bechor? Does he have the qualities? Is he making up these dreams about mothers bowing down to him when mom is dead? Okay. So, the Akedah was a test, correct? Yaakov sending Yosef to find his brothers is also a form of a test. And I gave you 4 examples where the Torah kind of hints to that. However, there's a problem here, okay? The Torah interrupts the whole story of Yosef with like a travel log, okay? Yosef goes to find his brothers. He can't find them, so he runs into a Malach, okay, Gabriel, on the way, and he says, where's my brother? And the brother says, Nasum is there, okay? That the brothers know have traveled from here to there. What do I need that story in the Torah for? What does that story tell me? It doesn't enhance the story that Yosef is looking for his brothers. And if every time I needed a travel log where somebody on a travel got lost and stopped to ask for directions, the Torah would probably have 6 Chumashim instead of 5. That story in and of itself doesn't change what's really going to happen to Yosef. It doesn't change it at all, okay? But I suggest to you that it does, because what's going on here is HaKadosh Baruch Hu, in a sense, is saying to Yaakov, you want to have an Akedah, you want to test somebody out, tests don't come from you, Yaakov. Tests come from me. I'm the one that tests people. You set up a test for Yosef. You had no right to set up this test for Yosef. If you would have set up this test for Yosef, what would have happened? Yosef would have gone to Shechem. He wouldn't have found his brothers. He might have turned around and come home. So what would you have been able to prove, Yaakov, from this? Nothing. I'm the one that sets up the tests, okay? And therefore the Torah inserts the fact that he was looking for a Malach, that he lost his way, and a Malach saved him, to bring a Malach into the story to say to Yaakov, I'm HaKadosh Baruch Hu, I'm the only one that could set up these various tests, not you. Your test sent him to Shechem. My test is going to send him the Do's son, all right? Because I'm the one that sets up the test. Okay. Hopefully now, I tied up a few loose ends.
It's not saying what the Yaakov sort of wanted Joseph to be a Bechor. It's his son, Yaakov knew that Reuben was the Bechor. I don't understand this whole thing was changing the Bechor.
I don't understand your question.
Yaakov knew that Reuben was the Bechor, is his firstborn.
Right.
So what's the question of making Joseph the Bechor?
Because he didn't accept, he didn't want, the question is, Yaakov knew that Reuben was his Bechor, so what was all his business with Yosef? He never accepted that. This was the brothers' grievance.
Joseph was not the Bechor, because one of the Bechor.
This was exactly what the brothers' grievance was. Reuben, like you're saying, has to be the Bechor. But was Reuben ever treated like the Bechor? It doesn't matter, but it does matter. It does matter. Because I told you the brothers were looking at history. What did history say? Okay, Abraham had two sons. He had Yishmael and he had Yitzchak. Who is the Bechor?
Shmuel.
Not originally. Who was the Bechor?
Ishmael.
Who got written out of history?
Ishmael.
Well, so who became the Bechor means legacy also. Who carried on the legacy? Yitzchak, the one who was not the Bechor. They didn't have Jewish at all, okay? Next generation. Yitzchak has two sons. He has Yaakov and Esau. Who's the Bechor? Esau, right? Who carries on the legacy? Yaakov, okay? Now we're down in the third generation. The brothers know this. They sit at their father's tish. They know all these stories. And Yaakov seems to be acting the same way. He's got Reuven. Reuven's the Bechor. But who does Yaakov want to be the Bechor?
Joseph.
He wants Yosef to be the Bechor. And he's treating him like the Bechor. Because he gave him Bishlayim. He gave him an extra coat. The coat is always a symbol of leadership.
But Marty, Hashem blessed Yishmael.
You're right, it doesn't make him a Bechor, but that was the brothers' grievance. To Yaakov's mind, Yosef was the Bechor. Okay. All right. Was there a question?
What I was just trying to say is that Hashem blessed Yishmael, and Yishmael and his descendants far outnumber Yaakov's descendants.
Ooh.
And Yitzchak gave Esav a blessing, and Esav became.
That's right. He gave them all these things. They all got all these wonderful, wonderful things, but they didn't get the right to carry on the legacy.
But they all outnumber the Jewish people. The Jewish people are the minority of minorities, and Edom and the Yishmael.
Which means what, Sarah? What's the conclusion? None of those people, none of those individuals got the right to carry on the Jewish legacy, and that's what we're talking about here.
True.
Sure, Yishmael got brachos. Sure, Esav got brachos. But they didn't get the Birkas Avraham. What was the fight about? Take a look at Yaakov and Esau. Each of them, if you look at the text, each of them got almost the exact same bracha. So the question becomes, what were they fighting about? If you look at the text, the brachas are almost exactly the same. They were fighting about the Birkas Avraham. That's what was at issue. Okay? Every one of those people, yeah, they became powerful. Asa, Rome, Yishmael, Arabs, whatever it is. But they're not us. They're not us. And that's what the brothers were afraid about. That they themselves would be written out, that there would be no role for them. All right, let's move on.
Yeah, could be.
So I want to finally now get to the Tamar story. I don't know, we're going to finish it today. And we have a very interesting thing here with Tamar and Yehuda. All the Mefarshim, every single one of the Mefarshim that has any kind of weight all ask the same question. What is this story doing here? I mean, if we're reading a novel, which we're not, but if we're reading a novel, okay, Yosef is being now taken to Mitzrayim. The previous portion that Yosef is taken to Mitzrayim. We want to know what happens to Yosef in Mitzrayim. That's the next logical thing. In fact, the chapter after this one opens up with the safety that and Yosef is brought down to Mitzrayim.
Marty, something is very disruptive here. Something is being very disruptive.
There's some music. Okay, good. Thank you. Every single one of the Mepharshim asked the question, what is this story doing here? It seems to be a digression or an interruption into the whole text. So I just want to show you a very interesting thing I heard from Rabbi Foreman, Rabbi David Foreman. He has a very interesting thing. Okay, and I spoke about this with Sid yesterday. He didn't seem to be too impressed, but maybe I can impress you. Okay? There are two, what we call digression stories in all of Bereshit. All of Bereshit. Okay? After the flood, we're mainly concerned with 10, 12 chapters with Avraham Avinu, and the story of Avraham Avinu, correct? That whole story is interrupted once. What is that story interrupted with? What's the story that interrupts the whole narrative of Avraham Avinu? Huh? No, that's before. That's before the Avraham story. Okay? It's interrupted the whole story about Lot and his daughters in Sodom. Has absolutely nothing to do with the whole narrative of Avraham Avinu. What has it got to do? It's a digression.
Yes, yes.
The other digression is the one right here. We have about 15, 16 chapters in a row. We're going to learn about the Yosef story. We start the Yosef story, and all of a sudden we're talking about Vayered Yehuda Me'Yisachar. We're going to learn about Yehuda and Tamar. Why are these two the only stories in all of Bereshit that are correct? So Bob says, obviously, Bob picked it up, that if they're two digression stories, perhaps they might be related. How are these two stories going to be related? How are these two stories going to be related? And this will lead us into the whole discussion of Malchus based on it. How are these two Bereshit stories related?
They show David Hamelech's background, where he comes from.
Yes, where he comes from. Somebody has the radio on. Somebody has the radio on against the stereo. Here's the digression. Okay?
Robin.
Joey.
They're both, okay, right. But they're both semi-Yibum.
Can you make it softer, please?
Can't hear you, Marty.
They're both,
Someone has the radio on.
they're both semi-Yibum stories. Okay? We'll go into what Yibum is in a couple of minutes, but they're both Yibum, semi-Yibum stories. What happens? Sodom is destroyed. Lot and his daughters find refuge in some cave. And the daughters, wrongly or rightly, think that what?
They're the last ones left.
Destroyed. And they, huh?
They're the only ones left.
Okay? So how are these two women going to go on? Huh? I said, no, it's not Zanus. Because the Torah says that their their actions were l'shem shemayim. They didn't know, but both the daughters were interested in a very, very noble cause. carrying on the world. They thought the world was destroyed. So if the world was destroyed, where does that leave them? It leaves them childless, and it leaves them unable to project into the next generation. So they devised this plot, to get their father drunk. I don't know, there's a question, if you look in the Torah, there's a lot of little dots on these words of getting the father drunk. Some say he knew, he didn't know, whatever it was. But ultimately, they get their father drunk. That's what the Torah says. And we'll build the next generation from our father. And they have this, right? And what happens? Okay? Both daughters get pregnant. And from this comes two nations. One comes Moab, and the other comes Ammon, right? Now, I'm not interested so much in Ammon, right? I'm interested more in Moab, okay? Who ultimately will come from Moab?
Ruth.
Ruth will ultimately come from Moab. Huh? Ruth, right. So my first digression story in the Torah is what? Has already been put in there to establish the Aim Shel Malchus, ultimately what will happen, okay? Ruth will be called the Aim Shel Malchus. Now in this story, what happens? I have a woman, Tamar, okay? She needs Yibum. She needs to carry on her generation. She sees that what's happening, Yehuda, for whatever reason he has, either he's afraid because he lost two sons, he doesn't want to give a third son to this woman, or he ultimately really, according to some portion, had no intention to give her to Shelah. But whatever it is, she's in a position where what? She's almost like an aguna. She needs Yibum. She's usher to anybody, huh? Yeah. Okay. So ultimately, she becomes pregnant, correct? She becomes pregnant, okay? And what happens from this questionable relationship, right? Lot with his daughters is a questionable relationship, and Tamar with her father-in-law is a questionable relationship. Although according to some of the it's not, but okay. The way we think about it today, a daughter with a father-in-law, not so kosher. But ultimately from this relationship, questionable relationships in both places, I also have I have two children born again. Two children born again. Now who are these children? Peretz and Zerach, right? Who comes from Peretz? Okay?
David.
Well, Boaz, ultimately. Boaz, right? Boaz. So I have Ruth coming from one digression in the Torah, correct? And I have Boaz coming down from a second digression. I have two semi-Yibum stories. Okay? I have Yibum with Lot, semi-Libum, and I have semi-Libum with Yehuda and Tamar. And now I have Boaz and Ruth. And what is Boaz and Ruth, basically? Boaz and Ruth get together only why? Because it's a Yibum story. It's a Yibum story. Okay? So you see how way back then, or to say like Sid said, the Torah knew everything that was going to happen. These stories were not just put in there quoted stories. They weren't, the digressions are so locked together that ultimately they're going to come down to Malchus Beis David. Boaz, Ruth, a Yibum story, and Beis David. Okay.
I just want to add one thing, Marty.
Go ahead.
Remember, these two mices created Melech HaMashiach. It's the Makkah before the Refuah. So like we learn in Gemara, we learn Masechtas Gittin first before we do Kedushin. So remember what I'm saying.
Okay, so what's it saying, if I can paraphrase it, that there's that these two digressions and the birth of David HaMelech, these two stories, that Hashem always creates the Refuah before the Makkah, right?
Exactly.
That this the Torah was anticipating all of this, okay? All right. So let's run through the story very quickly. Then we'll go back, okay? Then we'll go back and we'll take the story apart and understand it, okay? Vayihi bo Esahi, okay? And Rashi, right, it came to pass. You can look at your handouts now. I'm at the page. Which page am I at? I am on page, hang on. I'm on page what's called 89. Okay, starting the Yehuda Tamar story. Now, just want to put one thing together before we start this. The Torah uses common words to get an idea across. Okay? The Torah says, Vayehi bo Esahi, Vayered Yehuda meYesecho. I want to focus a little bit in on this word Vayered. What does Vayered mean?
Went
It
down.
could be going down physically, or it could be going down mentally and spiritually. Okay, and we'll develop this idea. Where was Yehuda holding in terms of his mental and spiritual outlook after the whole story of Mechiras Yosef? Where was he holding? How do you think he felt about it?
He lied to his father. He couldn't have been very happy.
He lied for his father. He created a deception that was going to last for 22 years. Yaakov was under the impression he wasn't sure if Yosef was really dead or alive. Some Mephoshim said he knew, so, whatever it was. But he created a deception that lasted for 22 years. Okay? What else? Spiritually, he went down. We'll develop this, I see next week. We're going to have to develop this. The brothers removed him from the position of leadership. The brothers removed him from leadership. Let's look at first Rashi. Look at your handouts. I think it's maybe number 8 or 9 in the back pages there. Lama nismechu pasha zulachan. This is we spoke about before. Rashi asked the question, why is this pasha right next to the previous one? Okay. The hipsik with pasha shel Yosef. And we made an interruption to pasha Yosef. The brothers brought him down from any position of leadership that Yehuda aspired to. Okay? And we'll develop more next week. The brothers saw the pain that Yaakov was living with, that the deception created. Okay? Amru, ato amato lamachro. They said, you wanted to sell him. Ilu amato la shiva or even show him loch. If you, Yehuda, would have told us to bring him back to his father, we would have listened to you. And next week, I want to talk about in detail, how does Rashi know this? How does Rashi know, from where does Rashi learn that the brothers would have listened to him?
Where did Yehuda do anything that distinguished him as the leader? He was the firstborn.
Well, question is, where did Yehuda do anything that distinguished him as a leader? Good question, and I'll answer it to you this way. Who is the only brother that was able to save him? Reuven wanted to save him. He threw him in a pit. But that didn't, that plan was a little bit based on deception. He was going to deceive his brothers because he planned to double back in the middle of the night or later on and pull him out of the pit. But that plan didn't go anywhere, right? That plan showed a lack of leadership because it was Reuven telling his brothers, I'm going to throw him in a pit. Okay? Yehuda aspired, had some sort of leadership because when it came to selling him to the Medonim, whoever we were sold to, the Ishmaelim, okay? The brothers listened to him. Why? Because if you look at the text, okay, he included his brothers in the planning, okay? He planned it out in the plural. He explained to his brothers exactly what they were going to do, okay? Crassly, why did the brothers listen to him? We spoke about this last week.
Money.
Money is always good. He was able to convince his money and brothers, not only won't we kill him, but there's a buck in this for us. I mean, who can turn down a buck if in fact, they got money for it? But there's a buck in this for us. Apparently, whatever arguments, that Yehuda was able to use, somehow, unlike Reuven, it convinced the brothers. They acted on his advice. Now, we said last week, I brought you down that political scientist by the name of Richard Neustadt, who argues that the most powerful part of a leader is the ability to persuade. Not to use the statutes to call out the army or to pass legislation. The most important thing of a leader is to be able to have the ability to persuade. Right? And apparently, Yehuda had the ability to persuade, because he persuaded his brothers ultimately not to kill Yosef.
Seems like Reuven was not a part of that, though, because he came back to the pit and he said, what happened? What am I going to do? He didn't know. Right.
So Reuven's plan was pretty flawed. If you're going to have a plan, you should be able to execute it, right? Okay. If you balance, Reuven, they say, went home because it was his turn to feed his father, to take care of his father. Which to you is more important? You have a brother in a grave yelling and screaming who could die, or a father who needs some food? I want to say to you that the father Yaakov had a rechush gadol. There was somebody there, maybe not one of the brothers, but the Shvatim all had sisters that were born. There would have been somebody there to take care of Yaakov, but there was nobody there when it came time to pull Yosef out of the bowl. Okay? There was nobody there. So that Reuven, I think, although his intentions were good, and this is the tragedy of Reuven throughout the Torah, his intentions are always good. His intentions were to protect his mother. That didn't work out. His intentions were, with his father's bed. That didn't work out, okay? His intentions were to be the first one up. Shnei Bonai Tammuz, he was the first one to volunteer to go down and save Yosef. And he used the examples, if I don't bring him back, let my two children die. Reuven was always the first. But his intentions and his planning never made any sense. And that's the tragedy with Reuven. Sid, you wanted to say something?
No, what you're saying is correct. All I'm saying is one thing. All his things, what he did was flawed. Yehuda had one thing with the Maisa, with Tamar, when he admitted that she's more righteous than me, which he said that made him for a king, because
correct. Correct. Sid, don't ruin it. That's next week.
I'll shut up.
Many is next week. We're running out of time. Sid said I'm right, that Reuven's leadership was somehow, or his pretensions to leadership was somehow always flawed. He always had an Eitzah, but the Eitzah somehow never worked out.
His problem was very simple. He had no patience.
His problem was, Sid said, he had no patience. Like all Kohanim that I know. Okay.
Like me, I have no patience. I admit it.
Okay. All right. Where was I? Okay. So by Yered Yehuda, I want to finish up with this thought. Oh, okay, I got it. It's 5-2 if you want to go. I want to finish up with this thought. The three stories are going to be connected. Building on the word Vayered, he went down spiritually. Okay? The Yosef story with his brothers. Okay? What does Yaakov say? Ki ered el b'ni ovel sheolah.
Right.
Yaakov was spiritually sent down, right? Yaakov lost the ability for 22 years. He couldn't figure out, through Nebuah, whatever it was. Some say he lost his Nebuah for 22 years. The whole story of Yosef being sold, Ki ered el b'ni sheolah. Okay? The story when we pick up next week, in the next parsha, the Yosef Hurad Mitzrayim. That's another variation of Vayered. Yosef Hurad. Yosef was also brought down spiritually. He was out of temporarily. out of the environment of his father. He was out of the environment of his brother. He was out of a Yiddish or Jewish neighborhood. He was sent down from Mitzrayim. So I have the three stories linking and connecting.
Hold on, Jerry.
Okay, Yaakov being brought down spiritually. Okay, Vayered Yehuda me'esachav. Yehuda now is going to be brought down spiritually, and we'll talk about this more next week. And finally, be Yosef Urad Mitzrayim. Yosef being brought down spiritually into an environment, Mitzrayim, where he's going to find it very, very difficult to live a Jewish life. With that, next week, Yehuda and Tamar, no digressions. We'll just get right into the story itself. Thank you for